Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Lipkowitz. I'm the CEO of Eon, and we're here today to talk about making relevant, engaging AI video at scale. You're all here, so you probably chose this for a reason, but I'd like to provide a little bit of context, and that I'm walking into this making the assumption that you develop courses or training for grown-up professional audiences. A lot of the content is complex or technical or scientific, and that typically you use text or bullet points to carry a lot of the content, and that you'd like to find a way using visual tools such as images and video to make that more engaging. Right? I think it's well known that video is a great way to represent complex topics and help people immediately get engaged or lean into those concepts. And therefore, you generate that buy-in at the beginning of your course that will sustain you all the way through. So that's the assumption I'm walking in here with. And we're not talking about legacy tools today. We're specifically talking about AI tools. And why are we doing that? Because generative AI is amazing. You've probably heard about it, read about it. Hopefully you've all played with the tools a little bit. But I'm just going to show you quickly some of the things you can do. For instance, with a single click, you can have a cybernetic course developer fly through a futuristic cityscape while smiling creepily at their futuristic laptop that looks like a magazine at the top. That's really easy to accomplish. You can sort of create a space version of yourself and have it introduce your course. So instead of what I said at the beginning,
Thank you for attending my presentation. I appreciate your spending time with me in this wasteland of content creation tools.
And again, I'm not describing really the world of content creation tools that we're discussing today to be a wasteland, just he was set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. So I wanted him to be accurate to his milieu. Something else you can do, you can make a giant, muscular, robot, knife-wielding chicken dance a little jig. Really, when I was using the tool, it was supposed to do a flying camera 360 around him. It didn't come out exactly right. But that's kind of why we're here today. We're going to discuss both the power and the limitations of all these tools that we're using. And when I say using, the real question is, look, generative AI is amazing. Like my stuff isn't amazing, but other people do amazing work. But how can you use it for work? And I don't mean how do you type into the boxes, although we'll talk about that a little bit. I mean, like if we were in person, I would say by show of hands, how many of you could deploy a giant, muscular, knife-wielding, potentially violent rooster in a course? And probably very few of you would raise your hands because it's going to be distracting. It's not going to comply with organizational guidelines. It's silly. It's not relevant to the content. And you would all be right that you would never use that unless you were doing something really silly. So we're going to talk about usability. And so how can you ensure the usability of the output from these generative AI tools? So we're going to look at this across 4 dimensions. The first one is content relevance, right? We talked about having complex or technical or scientific content. Do the visual elements that you're putting on the screen represent them well enough to carry the content? Brand compliance. Do the visual representations and the overall tone comply with your organization's requirements for how things look and feel, for their tone, and any other organizational rules that you need to navigate when producing output that is consumed either externally or internally? Speed to proficiency. You might say, hey, you were talking about the output. This is about me learning the tool. But it does matter because if you don't have speed to proficiency, after a year of subscribing to these tools, they're going to be considered shelfware. You're going to face budget constraints and you're going to drop them. And so you're not going to use the tools. So speed to proficiency is important because you need to get to a decent level quickly on these tools so you can continue creating output that is hopefully relevant and compliant. And lastly, and most importantly, does the output engage learners? Because if it doesn't, we're all going to fail and we're going to find new tools. And which tools are we going to look at? And I put this headline up there because I want to distract everybody who's ever seen Sound of Music. So you have, how do you solve a problem like my Sora running in your head? If you don't know, Sora is the name of OpenAI's video clip generating tool. And that's the first category we're looking at. The generative AI video clip generators. We're also going to look at the AI-powered stock video editors. And then we're going to look at the synthetic avatar companies, of which there are many, 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 many. As we do so, we're going to do a couple of balancing acts. And these are, different ways of restating what I said on the earlier slide. We're going to balance cool versus corporate. We're going to balance the amazingness of the tools with content relevance and brand compliance. We're also going to balance easy versus effective, the last two of the 4 boxes. A lot of the tools, knowing that if you don't get proficient quickly, try very hard, also just to be nice, to make the tools easy to learn. But sometimes that comes at the expense of control. So they may be less effective at engaging learners. It may also be less within your control to achieve content relevance or brand compliance. So let's just, using these alliterative judges' scales, we're going to balance cool and corporate and easy and effective. So we'll start with the generative AI video clips. I'd mentioned Sora earlier, but right now the most famous one is Runway, and that's the one I used for the clips earlier. There's other sites called Luma and Kling that do similar things. And this is what the interface looks like. Not complicated in the slightest. I don't know how big it is on your screen where you're watching, but the box at the top left is asking you to drag and drop an image. It's an image prompt box. If you have an existing picture, drop it in the box. The lower left box is a text prompt box. You can prompt it with just text. You can also use both, and you should use both. There's a few presets at the bottom, one about aspect ratio. If you can make out the numbers, it says 16:9, which is a typical movie aspect ratio. There's style prompts like cinematic. There's tool prompts like camera. This is not a how-to video. I just want to orient you to what it looks like. You can see the text prompts as a castle in the mountains. And in the output box, there's a castle in the mountains. And if you press play on that, you'd probably have a cinematic flying camera shot around that. And you would have achieved it by typing 5 words into a box, selecting a few presets and pressing a button. Pretty good. These things are great for getting cinematic. They're great for moving the camera. They're great for creating and entering alternate worlds. And they're great for setting the tone instantly, all of which are good things, I think, with which to engage learners, at least at the beginning. They're less great for moving characters and objects. In other words, you can't do a whole lot inside the video clip, right? If there was a person and you wanted them to enter the castle, that would be really tough, right? The two things in its mind, in air quotes, are completely independent. Similarly, having characters in the world interact is a problem. Like we had a writer analyzing these tools and they did a test, or maybe they read it in an article. They generated a person at a birthday party and she blew on the candles and the candles didn't go out, right? She looked good, the candles looked good, the cake looked good, the room looked good, her family looked good, but she blew in the candles and the flames didn't even flicker. That's a little bit beyond its pay grade right now, as is obeying the laws of physics. So the workflow, as we said, pretty easy. When working with these tools, unlike the picture on the screen, I would encourage you to use an image as a prompt. It's much better at working off of images than it is just off of text. Text to video doesn't always adhere to the prompts. And what's on the screen, it does, but that was also very simple, only 5 words, and kind of a low hurdle for accuracy. I think the ideal use case for this is some kind of introductory clip to gain engagement, buy-in early. I always feel like it's important to have learners or audiences and make them a lean-in worthy promise right at the beginning that says, this is not going to be terrible. This course is not going to be like going to the dentist without anesthetic. It's all going to be good and you're going to learn a lot. Something cinematic is a great way to make and fulfill that promise. A key risk factor, I'm going to do one of these for each class of tools. The output is a video clip. That is a file that you can do nothing on the inside to. And as commonly happens with AI-generated video clips or images, a lot of it's good, a lot of it's not good. In the early days, and if you read articles about this, people would generate wonderful figures and they would have 6 or 9 fingers. Can you go in and fix that? Nope. You just have to start over. The baby goes out with the bathwater. A lot of the sites that I mentioned earlier will let you click generate a number of times. You don't even have to wait until the previous request is done rendering. So you can ask it to make 4 of the same thing, or you can send 1 into the queue, change some prompts, use a different image, and you can just stack things up in the queue. That's a great way to get a good output faster, but also drives costs. In these sites, you buy credits and you consume credits each time you press the generate button. And you'll see that using this method drives the credits number down quite quickly. But sometimes it's a trade-off we're all willing to make, right? If we're on a deadline, earning $10 or $15 of credits may seem like pennies. Key point, can't edit the output. You're in what I like to call reprompt and pray mode. So for content relevance, these sites, not really good. They're great for alternate universes. They're not really good for representing complex or even proprietary content. They studied the public internet. If your content was not out there and well labeled on the public internet and digested by the model, it's not going to do a good job answering your text prompts. Brand compliance, pretty medium. If you start just from a text, it's going to be poor for the reasons I just mentioned. But if you choose a brand compliant image, you will probably get a brand compliant video out. So we're calling this one medium. Speed to proficiency, I think these tools are really easy to get started on. You're going to have a lot of fun. And engagement, yeah, this is what they're great for, engaging people quickly. Moving on to the next category, AI stock video editors. So these are editors, video editors, which have licensed with all of the big stock image and video clip companies. So they put literally millions of assets at your hand, and you just input your script, as you can see on the screen here, and it's going to automatically read, in air quotes, your script and match it to images from the various libraries and drop them along a video timeline, and you'll have a rough cut of a video pretty quickly. They'll then have some limited tools over the top where you can maybe trim the edges of the clips to make them a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, and maybe some PowerPoint-like tools, which I'd say you kind of already know how to use if you want to put flying text boxes on top or some shapes or other things to visually augment them. They're great for, getting a script that's all words on its feet to be pictures, right? They're going to do all the suggesting for you. That's what their superpower is. That's what their AI, in air quotes, is. It's going to suggest images and clips, drop them in a timeline for you, do all the heavy lifting for you, give you a platform to do PowerPoint-y-like things to make it a little fancier. But really what they're best for is taking a dense script and wallpapering it for you, because this can be painful if you had to do all that from scratch. And I'm going to come back to this point later. They're less great for any content that is not generic. Again, I think if you have specific medical or scientific content, you're going to get really generic medical looking things out of these sites that may not carry your specific content well. They're also not great at promoting a consistent visual look and feel. I'm going to do a little deep dive on that on the next slide. Workflow is great. You input your script. The AI is going to match words in your scripts. You can kind of see a section highlighted on the screen and drop it in the timeline for you, and then enable you, as we've discussed, to do some light editing on top. You're not going to have a steep learning curve here. But the ideal use case is not really, I think, the type of courses you're going to create, because I picture your courses as being very, scientific, technical, content heavy. I think the best use case is really image of a person surfing on an island on a sunny day, and this text comes up that says summer sale 20% off, and they're done, 1 clip, 2 clips, 20 seconds, social media advertisement to go on Instagram. That's what I think these are great for quickly doing. I have some doubts about their ability to carry heavy content. The key risk factor, no visual consistency, right? They're treating each word independently. They're not thinking about the relationship between the words in your script. They're looking at each word kind of in its mind, predicting an image, matching that to the tags in the stock library, because stock library, the images are all tagged. If you were working with a Shutterstock, for instance, manually, you would type search terms. And that's kind of what the AI is doing here. It's reading your script, not maybe only taking the words in your script, but doing some intelligence behind it to broaden that into a set of search terms and then returning an image. What you get is kind of a lack of visual and sometimes even lack of semantic consistency. And this over time is distracting and irritating for the viewer and decreases engagement. The output is something what I call, the island of mismatched socks. And you can go in and edit it, but the whole point of using this was to not have to manually edit it. Another point, I mentioned that these stock video sites are great for wallpapering overly long, overly wordy, overly dense scripts. They're great for wallpapering those things, but wallpapering is bad. And this is not a knock on the sites. This is actually a compliment to these sites. I actually appreciated it, or my appreciation of their value had increased as I was getting ready for this presentation, realizing almost every script I've ever seen in my professional career has been overwritten, especially in business and corporate settings. Everybody has to add words. Everybody thinks in words. Everybody adds special, wonky, overly long, overly complex words to a script. And everybody reviews the scripts for visual communication. They review the words and the words only. When the words are good, then they give it to somebody to make it visual. Not an ideal workflow at all. Not taking full value of the medium. Ideally, in creating visual communications, we should be thinking in images and using as few words as possible, because the value of visual medium comes from using the learner's entire brain and activating all of it, not just having them digest words, right? We're trying to go beyond bullet points. But the reality is most scripts are overly long, and these tools enable you to wallpaper. But again, not a knock on the tools, it's a knock on us. We should put more effort during the scripting and conceiving phase to be more visual from the outset and less words first, pictures second. So overall, rundown on these: content relevance, again, limited because they're stock video sites. By definition, almost everything is generic. They're not going to know anything specific from your world. Brand compliance, generally going to be good. It's another yellow by average, right? They're red from the first point. You're never going to really match the content exactly, which may, violate organizational guidelines, but there also be nothing offensive in there at all. You're not going to be able to make a wrong step because these things are sanitized for corporate use. You're never going to step on a landmine in your image choice. Speed to proficiency, these tools are very easy. We talked about easy versus effective. They tilted toward easy and they did a good job. Will it be engaging to learners? I think learners want better content relevance and therefore not going to be really engaging. I think in really short bits, stock can carry it. The longer your video, the less the learners are going to remain engaged with stock images and video clips. Third category, synthetic avatars. If you don't know what these are deepfake talking heads. Even if you're not looking at Gen AI tools, you've probably read about deepfake talking heads in the news in the context of elections and misinformation. This is not a platform to say these tools are bad. A lot of people like to jump to that conclusion. The tools are tools. They're how they're used. And as you can see in this picture, a lot of people use them for very benign purposes in corporate settings. They don't make them look like real people, although you can easily create one. Well, not easily, but you can create one of, say, a senior executive in your organization, and you can make it look like them and sound like them to a reasonably good degree. But a lot of people use it just to, they want to make a video and they want to make a video quickly. On these sites, you can make a talking head video. And what I mean by a talking head video is a video that's nothing besides a person talking at you. You can quickly make a talking head video because you just give it the script, you select a language, you select an avatar, you press a button, you wait a little bit, and then there's this fake person reading your script at you. They're less great for visually representing the content because there is no visual representation. It's only a talking head, and therefore, as I kind of alluded to on the previous slide, they're not taking full advantage of a visual medium. It's just a talking head. The workflow, it's just super simple. You give it your script. As I said, you choose an avatar, you choose a language, you press a button, and you're done. Easy. The ideal use case is when you need a video on a serious deadline, because you don't have to do anything, right? If you have your script, you're kind of done. I think that's the joy of these things. They are fast and easy. The key risk factor is the uncanny valley. Not going to spend a lot of time on it here because I think we have about 6 minutes left and there's other things I want to talk about. Uncanny valley is most definitely an important point with regards to engagement. For those who don't know, it's when something looks right but is a little bit wrong. You kind of get stuck on that and you don't pay attention to the content. You pay attention to what's wrong. But that's been discussed a lot over the past 2 years. We're going to use the time in this presentation on something else. If you're really interested in uncanny valley, just Google it. You will find plenty to read. Quick review of these tools. Content relevance, medium. You wrote your script. If your script passed, the video is going to pass because the script and the video are largely the same thing. Brand compliance, same. It's a talking head. There's no organizational guidelines that prevent people from talking at you. But there's nothing else, right? There's no images to comply with or anything. If you had to have a certain look and feel to your video, you're not going to be able to achieve that. It's just going to be a fake person's head. Speed to proficiency. I mean, I wish I had a separate shade of green. They're really fast and easy to get started. And engaging learners, not over the long haul, right? It's a fake head. It's going to have a little uncanny valley in it. It's a text-to-speech voice. They've gotten a lot better. I mean, even 2 years ago, these things still sounded like old, like 1970s phone systems. They've gotten a lot better. They're even a little bit expressive and emotive now. I mean, the old ones used to give me a headache within the first 10 seconds. The modern text-to-speech does not do that. It is genuinely a lot better, but it's not real enough. It's not going to vary enough. It's not going to shape the content enough to engage your learners over the long haul. It's still going to be fairly monotonous. It's going to be a machine speaking at you. So like to introduce, use them as chapter markers, great, 10 seconds at a time. The head comes back, tells you what you just did, what comes next. They're great for that. I wouldn't put a lot of heavy content on them over a serious duration. It's not going to work. People are going to tune out, stop listening to the content, just start staring at the head, figuring out what's wrong with it. This is about text with mouths. And this is food for thought, right? I was talking a lot in each of the past two categories that they're not taking full advantage of the medium, right? Visual medium is better because it has so much more power. It can engage so much more of the brain than just the verbal side. But when we just have narration and non-engaging images over it, or not, especially non-related, or semi-related generic images that are not engaging over it, or when it's just a head talking at you and there really is no imagery representing the content, we are failing to take full advantage of the medium. And this is nothing against the synthetic avatar sites. We've been doing this our whole lives. Most of television is semi-engaging talking heads, even real ones. Some of them have a lot of personality, especially nowadays. That's the whole point, is how much attitude they can inject in their talking headness. But talking heads have always been an overrepresented part of video, and not because they were engaging or effective. They were there because they were cheap to produce, and they were also, especially in corporate settings, easy to approve. The talking head is probably not going to violate brand guidelines. Senior executives enforcing these deadlines who don't want to try to visualize your visual approach to a visual medium would always just collapse it down to talking heads, especially when they learned it was cheaper. They weren't really thinking about engagement and effectiveness. It's usually just kind of an executive decision about cheap and non-offensive. So that and that's not going to change. So that forces us into, if we're going to over-rely on talking heads, then how can we make them engaging? For those of you old enough to remember Here Now the News, this is my sarcastic take on talking heads. So I started giving this some thought, and I thought, when were talking heads really, really good? And my mind went to the very first TED Talks. So I started to think, what made these speakers effective? Try to do thought leadership on my own. Bad idea. But what I came up with was, maybe if you have deep subject matter expertise and you have charisma, then you can be a really effective talking head that would really grab people's minds, right? Because I think for those of us who engage with these things and remember them, we were moved by them. We were inspired by these original TED Talks. We watched them, other people watched them, we talked about it, we thought about them afterwards. It was everything we, as educators, would want to achieve in our lifetime. So my first thoughts were subject matter expertise and charisma. And then I started reading how TED Talk described these. So I'm going to pull some of the words out. I think I have only about a minute left. I got to go fast. They mention humor, humanity, drama, urgency, all good things, emotionally charged, and even one person burst into song. So I tried to distill this down. Humanity, having a relatable speaker that we perceive as a three-dimensional, multifaceted human being, very important. Authority, the subject matter expertise, the conviction in ideals, the passion for a cause. The journey, a lot of them were great at structuring their content into a story, That's what I think was the best about these things. They took us on a journey through their content. There was a lot of perception shift where they present a set of facts and we would perceive it one way from the way we were conditioned. They would pull the rug out and change it. And it was an epiphany. And we were moved by that journey through the content and spontaneity, right? They weren't robots. They would suddenly burst into song or tell jokes or have humor or cry. And, and we could lose ourselves in them. We could immerse ourselves in the totality of that. So that's, no matter what tools you're using, I want you to remember these things and to the extent possible, build it into your content. Running out of time. I'm coming to you from Vyond, which is a video creation platform. We're sort of a all-in-one. All of the tools that we described today, we have elements of those on our site, all in one place. If you want something really easy, you can get a video from a text prompt in just a few seconds. And unlike other things, have the ability to edit every aspect of it. We're very trustworthy. We're in 2/3 of the Fortune 500. We try to cover all those 4 boxes: the relevance, the brand compliance, the ease, the engagingness. We also think hard and long about information security, data privacy, legal, and ethics, which most organizations care deeply about, and also try to make the experience a whole lot of fun. With my remaining time, I would like to thank you very much for spending this time with me here today. I really hope you found it useful.